Namaskar to everyone and good afternoon. Uh, Now we are going to start the seminar, and the topic of today's seminar is politics of natural resources privatization in Odisha, the case of Chilika Lake, and we are really fortunate to have with us Dr. Matilde Aduchi, who is working as research associate in the School of Oriental and African Studies in the University of London, and then we have with us the discussant, Professor Birendra Kumar Naik, who will be basically discussing the work of Dr. Matilde. And then also we have with us Srijukta Srikant Mohanty, who is the state leader of All India Khet Mazdoor Kisan Sabha. And there are also other people who were involved in the Chilika movement. I think many people would be aware of the Chilika movement. That was there was a protest in Soran. Basically, the fishermen had opposed the privatization of the process of privatization of Chilika Lake, and so the people who are associated with that movement are also present in this meeting, and so I welcome everyone to this webinar, and I will not take much time because there are Professor Banikan Misra who will be basically presiding over this session, who will be moderating the discussion, who was also the former president of Orissa Economics Association. Currently, he is working in the Xavier Institute of Management or Xavier University of Bhubaneswar. And he has very good affiliation with Dr. Matilde. They have worked together in the past. So I will not take much time for that because Professor Manikat Misra will be introducing all the speakers. Now, before we get into that, as a formality, I would invite the President of Orissa Economics Association, Professor Bhavesh Sen, to give some introductory remark and to give an introduction of Professor Bhavesh Sen. Professor Bhavesh Sen retired from the Analytical and Applied Economics Department of Utkal University in 2013, and he was of course my teacher, and I worked with him as a colleague later in the same department, although now I have moved to Niger, Bhubaneswar. And so with this, I welcome all the participants of this webinar, and now I invite the President of Orissa Economics Association, Professor Bhavesh Sen, to give the introductory remark.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Orissa Economic Association, I welcome you all to this webinar on politics of natural resources privatization in Orissa, case of Chilika Lake. Now about the association, this is one of the oldest regional academic association of the country, and it was established in 1968. So, and after that we have passed so many years, and it is gradually day by day, gradually we are getting better that way, in the sense that we are gradually having more and more academic discussions nowadays. And particularly this year, because of this pandemic situation, we are having a lot of webinars in our association. And so every year we organize the annual conference, and we organize the capacity building workshop for teachers and researchers of our state. And the association has been publishing Orissa Economic Journal since 1968. Recently, it has been enlisted in UGC CARE, and we have launched a new website recently, and in that website, all the past copies of the Orissa Economic Journal are available. So they are uploaded and are now available. So This year we have prepared a report on COVID-19 and the economy of issues and challenges. Also, we organized a webinar based on this report on June 18, 2020. In another webinar, Mark Patnaik spoke on a strategy for post-pandemic development on July 11, 2020. We are in the process of bringing out a special issue of Orissa Economic Journal on COVID-19, and we always organize academic discussions on contemporary issues. And so we had one webinar on new education policy and autonomy of universities on 20th September 2020, where the invited speakers were Professor Atul Sood, CSRD of JNU, Dr. Vimala Ramchandran, ERU consultant, New Delhi, and Professor Aditya Kumar Mahanti of Central University Tripura, Agartala. And so today we are going to, in continuation of that program, today we are going to have the discussion on this this webinar on politics of natural resources privatization in Odisha, the case of Chilika Lake, and the speaker, Dr. Matilda Aducci, Research Associate School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Discussant Dr. Virendra Kumar Nayak, retired professor at Utkal University, was my colleague there also, and moderator Dr. Bani Kanta Mishra, professor XIMB and former president of Orissa Economic Association. It is very nice to see Bani. And anyway, and so now Dr. Bani Kanta Mishra, I will hand over everything to Dr. Bani Kanta Mishra to continue. Okay, so Dr. Bani Kanta Mishra will introduce the our guests, and he will moderate the whole session. So Dr. Bani Kanta Mishra, please. Yeah. Bani, it's for you.
Manikant sir, you have to now unmute and also.
Yeah, can you give me a screen sharing so that my PPT can be shown, or you can show the PPT from your side, that my first page of PPT?
Yes,
it's my introduction of Matilda. Is that, if you can show that, everyone can see that with the audio problems?
Yes, sir. That is.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, so good afternoon, and good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary folks, to this Orissa Economic Association webinar by Dr. Matilda Aducci. Odisha Orthaniti Sanghar a webinar by Jalo Alochana by Jahaku Jalochana, who upon to Sadar Nimantrana, Sadar Abhyarthana. Matilda, ciao, buongiorno, benvenuti al webinar del Orissa Economic Association. It is a privilege and a joy to introduce Dr. Matilda Aducci, who is a noted scholar, who also happens to be my Italian sister. She is currently a research associate at the Department of Development Studies of SOAS, which is the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. She obtained a PhD degree in Civilization, Society and Economy. Civilization, Society and Economy. Of the Indian subcontinent at the University of Rome, La Sapienza, and the thesis title was Social Movements in Development, the Case of Chilika Lake in India. She got an MSc in Development Studies at the SOAS and a laurea in Political Science at the University of Turin, where she graduated cum laude. Cum laude is the most prestigious degree with which you graduate. From 2012 to 2017, she was a lecturer in Political Science at the Department of Culture, Politics and Society at the University of Turin, Italy, where I had the privilege and the pleasure of being a visiting professor 3 years back. Matilde is a very committed researcher, has done some excellent fieldwork in Orissa. She has worked on the political economy of privatization of the mining sector in Orissa, and also on the quality of life of the mining workers in some selected parts of the state. She is currently completing a book titled Neoliberalism at the Margins, Dynamics of Social Dominance, Exploitation, and Exclusion in the Indian state of Orissa. So it's my pleasure to welcome my Italian sister, Matilde, for her talk. And she'll have 40 minutes to give the talk. And Matilde will remind you just 5 minutes before the ending time. We'll just give a reminder that 5 more minutes is left. So over to you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Orissa Economics Association for inviting me, the president of the association, Professor Babesh Sen, and the secretary of the association, Dr. Amarendra Das. I would also like to thank Professor Banikanta Mishra, Professor Virendra Nayak, and S.J. Shrikant Mohanty for being here, for introducing me and to discuss my talk. And I would like to ask you one additional minute in order to acknowledge my profound intellectual and human debt with Professor Banikanta Mishra and with Professor Virendra Nayak. Their intellectual generosity and their human generosity with me has been immense. I have always discussed my research with them throughout all these years, and this has been extremely important for me on an intellectual level. And their human generosity has made me feel that in Orissa I have a family, and I cannot thank them enough for that. The same is for many scholars, journalists, activists, and friends that I have in Orissa. I cannot mention all of them, but I am profoundly grateful to each of them. And lastly, I would like to acknowledge a profound intellectual debt with late Professor Saktipadi, who has left us an immensely important scholarly work on Orissa. And this seminar is for me an occasion also to discuss the analytical approach that I have tried to use in order to try to contribute to the understanding of the widespread socio-economic imbalances that historically hit the social fabric of Orissa. Which is an important mining state in India, but which has been historically hit by severe poverty and inequality. And thinking about my analytical approach, this makes me think in 2004, while I was conducting my first fieldwork period in Orissa as a PhD student, I attended a celebration of the 57th Independence Day in India in Bhubaneswar. And the introductory speech ended with an emphasis for Odisha's need for less government and more governance. In the face of the disturbing socioeconomic scenario of the state, which was at least partially embodied by the slums spreading all over the cities, this sentence evoked a crucial tenet of the neoliberal project. It was echoing the imagery of illness, disease, and pathology, widespread corruption, and profound inefficiency that historically is part of the neoliberal representation of the state. I think we can go to the second slide. And it assumed the limit actually to deepen the neoliberal economic reform that India and Orissa had started in 1991, drawing upon the language of governance, supposedly a good governance, as if it was a technical language. I think I would need the first slide. Can I control the slide myself? No. Okay. Okay. And when I was attending this speech, the final exhortation of the orator that actually invoked and was praising the neoliberal reforms and was hardly surprising, because by the time it was pronounced, the neoliberal imaging of the state as a hypertrophic institution populated by bureaucrats and politicians prone to the misuse of resources had informed profoundly the academic and the public discourse. And indeed, since my first fieldwork, the issue of corruption was of importance. And in fact, I was studying a phenomenon, the de facto privatization of Chilika Lake, the spreading of shrimp aquaculture, illegal shrimp aquaculture, which was illegal and whose very existence depend upon the the acquiescence of the state socio-political dominant stratum, which, as per my fieldwork findings, appeared to tolerate illegal aquaculture practices and to obtain an illegal monetary compensation while tolerating the spreading of the practices in the state. And we will go back to this point. But I would like to stress here, and this is an important part of my reflection on the way in which we should analyze the unfolding of socio-economic dynamic in Orissa. If I read the phenomenon of illegal privatization of Chilika Lake through the lens of the neoliberal view of the state and of state bureaucracy, something appears to be missing from the picture. In fact, if I read this phenomenon as an expression of widespread but individual rent-seeking behavior by individual bureaucrats, I think that something is importantly missing from the picture. And actually what is missing from the picture, if I adopted the rent-seeking individual as my unit of analysis, is the understanding of the unfolding of the socio-economic power dynamics, and better the understanding of the unfolding of capitalist relations. Basically, if I use the analytical tool, which are the mainstream tool at the moment into economics and political science, what is missing from the picture is capitalism itself. And I found this approach reductionist, and therefore I made an effort to contribute to the comprehension of the unfolding of capitalist dynamics and capitalist relations in the state. And when I tried to do that, since my first fieldwork, a question that I had to face was the positioning of the socio-political dominant stratum of Orissa, made up by top-level bureaucrats and politicians within capitalism, within the unfolding of capitalist dynamics. And this was a theoretical issue that I had to confront in the course of my research in Orissa, and it was this issue that basically brought me to try to understand the dynamics of illegal mining privatization in the state. As I have already noticed, the issue of corruption emerged prominently in the course of my research activity, and it was importantly related to the access of natural resources, water resources in the case of Chilika Lake, as well as mineral resources. And as I have said, since I was not satisfied with a perspective which is still dominant in our discipline, centered around the rent-seeking individual, the rational individual, I try to privilege a historically specific and socially embedded political economy perspective to try to understand the class position of the local socio-political dominant stratum. And here I have to say that the work of Professor Manoranjan Mohanty, of late Professor Bhisma Moipadi, and of late Professor Sakti Padi was extremely important. And now it appeared clear that the socio-political dominant stratum of the state made up of top-level bureaucrats and politicians who mainly descended from upper caste landed group belonging to the coastal area, had been historically able to exercise the control, at least since independence, over the abundant natural resources of the state through the control of the state apparatus. And actually, this group, since independence, has shaped the realm of production, of social production in Orissa, because in fact it has constantly fostered the growth of the extractive sector in the state in response during the developmental era to the need of the all-Indian capital, the need of cheap mineral of the all-Indian capital, and within the neoliberal turn of capitalism to the need of international capital. In so doing, it emerged from field of finding, and it emerged actually in many official documents in Orissa and in work of other scholars. It has been constantly able to ensure to itself the possibility to divert a flow of rent, because it has been constantly able, through the control of the state apparatus, to control the natural resources of the state. It has been constantly willing to allow the illegal exploitation to a certain extent of the mineral resources in exchange for an illegal monetary compensation. But within a political economy view, we can read this as actually the possibility to receive a constant flow of rent through the control of the state material, which has been reached through the control of the state. I have defined this dominant stratum as an inherent class, and I think that this group, borrowing upon and rebalancing categories, can also be described as a class of capital. And I think that this is important because I think that this helps us maybe to understand that the profound inequality that hit the social fabric of Orissa are not the outcome of a lack of capitalist development, but are actually the result of the way in which capitalist dynamics unfold in the state of Orissa. And these dynamics were started to be clear in the case of Chilika Lake de facto privatization. De facto privatization means illegal privatization. And I think that in this case, a Gramscian understanding of the state may be much more useful than a neoliberal understanding of the state, because in fact, we can conceive adopting the Gramscian notion of the state as an instrument of organization of class power, as an instrument through which the dominant class of Orissa asserted its power over the subaltern people, but at the same time, we can also understand the state as a terrain of class struggle. And in fact, if we look at the struggle made by the Chilika fishermen people movement in order to try to oppose the illegal privatization of the lake and in order to ask to the state to implement the law, we can see that they actually try to engage with the state institutions in order to ask the implementation of legality. And I think that there is some important work done by many Indian scholars and by also by Surya Sinha, who is actually stressing the way in which the denial of the implementation of the law is a way in which the dominant classes in India may actually assert their power because they are denying the access to the law, to the subaltern strata of the population in order to reap the economic and social fruits of rapid capitalist developments. And I think that Chilika Lake represents an important case in which actually the denial of the implementation of the law has been an instrument through which the dominant classes have asserted their power on the subaltern fishing population. And this had important implications also on the livelihoods of the fishing people that has been, in the course of this year, all the more fragmented. I also have to say that when I started my PhD, the fishermen people movements was extremely active. I will go back to that, but when I came back to revisit Chilika Lake in 2015, actually their resistance capacity was much weaker. And I tried in myself with fieldwork to understand why it was so, and what were the implications of a relentless implementation of illegal practices, of a relentless denial of implementation of the law on the fishing people livelihoods and resistance capacity. I think that this audience is well aware of the dynamics that are unfolding on Chilika Lake, so I think that I can really briefly describe them. In between 1991 and 1993, when India started its economic reform in the state of Orissa, between other things, the state projected actually a joint venture with the conglomerate Tata in order to promote shrimp cultivation in a part of Chilika Lake. This was a project of de jure privatization of part of the lake waters. This project was never implemented because there was a wide social alliance against this project. But in 1993, actually, Orissa High Court banned aquaculture in Chilika Lake. This was confirmed by the Indian High Court in 1996. What happened is that Chilika, it was declared illegal, the aquaculture in Chilika Lake, but since 1993, actually there was a spread of illegal aquaculture practices in the lake implemented by local powerful interests, and at that time a movement started against these practices led by the Chilika Confederation of Lake Fishers, the Chilika Matsajebe Masang. And in my first fieldwork, I have actually studied their protests against illegal aquaculture practices, and I think they were asking important demand. They were actually having important demands to the state. Yes, they were asking the implementation of the law, and so they were asking actually to respect the ban on illegal aquaculture in Chilika Lake, and actually to demolish all the garris. They were also asking to revitalize the fishing people cooperatives. And this, I think, was very important because they were actually the bearers of a transformative project. They were asking the implementation of transformative public policies because they wanted to promote a collective dimension of fishing, and which means a demand for substantial democratization of the social and economic life in Odisha. But their demands had gone unneeded, and I think that we could briefly discuss. I would briefly summarize the findings on the political economy of aquaculture in my first fieldwork in Orissa, to go back to after that to the findings of my second fieldwork. And there is a slide on political aquaculture from the mid-2000s. Yes, from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, which was my first fieldwork. Actually, there was an important nexus in the control of the illegal aquaculture activities, illegal shrimp cultivation, which involved local exporters that were exporting prawns also to the foreign market, and which involved also the socio-political dominant stratum of Orissa, the so-called neo-rentier class, as they were deriving part of the profits made out of local exporters in order to turn a blind eye on the implementation of these activities. We actually, there were different modalities of implementation of aquaculture. You can see 4 modalities at the village level. And normally, the prevailing modality was through a violent encroachment of the lake waters. There were agents of the company who were contacting an informal agent at the village level. Sometimes this modality, there could be a mediator that was a local politician not established yet at the village level. And through this network, they were actually able to start to encroach the Chilika Lake waters. And this network importantly relied upon the informal credit networks in the lake, as the fishing cooperatives were in fact not in the position to give to the fishing people the credit they needed. And here the importance of the fishermen demand to revitalize the cooperatives again. Actually, at that point, there was a well-established and entrenched network of informal credit in the lake. Fish traders and wholesalers used to buy the fish and to give loans to the fishing people. They didn't ask for the money back, but they asked for the fish, and they used to pay the fish less than the market prices. It was through this network and of informal credit that actually aquaculture started to be implemented. These networks were crucial because it could often happen that the agent of the export company, the informal agent, intermediary, was involved in the previous networks of informal money lending in the lake. There was another modality which was emerging at that time in 2004 when I was doing my fieldwork, which was the attempt to involve the fishing people cooperative society in aquaculture. This modality was emerging at that time, and it was difficult to investigate. But when I came back in 2015 for my second fieldwork on Chilika Lake, I knew by that time that the movement was much weaker than before, although the fishing people continued to consider illegal aquaculture as a tremendous problem that was creating problems to their livelihood. And actually, when I was back in 2015, I actually could see that the first modality, the involvement of the cooperative society, was prevailing. The other modalities, the violent encroachment, was still there. But it was on the rise, the modality of involving the primary cooperative society, and at the same time, the practice of subleasing was also had also emerged. And I think that we can go to the slide about the political economy of aquaculture as I could understand it in my second fieldwork. I wonder, what does it mean to involve the fishing cooperatives in illegal aquaculture practices? And what does it mean? How does it happen? What is its political economy? And what is its impact on the movement and on the fishing people movements? And the nexus between the new renter class and the exporters was solid. There was a diversification of the use of rent diverted from aquaculture. The new renter class appeared to be buying now also building plots. The exporters appeared now to diversify their activities in the mining sector, in the real estate sector. But what does it mean at the village level to try to involve the cooperative society? And while trying to understand this, revisiting the villages that I had visited before, and sometimes also new villages, it actually emerged a picture, a complex picture. In some cases, only a minority of households are involved. And here, clearly, there is an attempt to gain the consent to illegal shrimp cultivation from a limited, a small, a tiny section of the fishing population. This creates divisions that are detrimental to the fishing people. And few fishermen leaders confirmed that there have been attempts by agents of the companies to involve in aquaculture activity fishing people who had previously played important role in the resistance movement. And in a very few cases, these attempts had been successful. And these had serious implications on the viability of the movement. So in this case, the threat of violence was still there if other villagers tried to oppose the encroachment of the water. And I remember talking about that in a focus group with women in a village, and they told me that in their village, aquaculture was only for influential people, and they were not allowed to join the meetings in which these people discuss the aquaculture dynamics. So there is a modality through which actually there is an attempt to generate some consent over aquaculture activities. These few families involved may try to mitigate the social conflict in the village, so then they may try to pay the expenses for some festival. However, the threat of violence is there. And all the more, the aquaculture management of the conflict, the conflict around aquaculture is transformed in a village level problem, and the companies step back from this. But there is a second modality of involving households in the number of households in the Chilika fishing villages, of involving them in illegal aquaculture practices. And actually, this modality was a rather different one. This was not when a consistent number of households is involved. I think that we were not in front of an attempt to create some consent around these practices, but I think that this modality was primarily intended in disrupting the resistance capacity of the fishermen and in spreading the cost of the illegal cultivation of shrimps in Chilika Lake on the fishing people, in offloading part of the cost on the fishing people, whose vulnerability brought them to the point to participate in this. As, first of all, they were well aware that notwithstanding their protests, the law and the implementation of the law was continuously denied. And so the illegality was persistent in the lake, and they felt that notwithstanding their efforts of resistance, it was incredibly difficult to change the situation. On the other hand, this situation, as the fishermen were at difficulties to fish due to the geris, in the course and over the years, actually created worsened the socio-economic condition of the fishing people and fragmented their livelihoods. When the fishing people were fighting against aquaculture in 2004, they actually were noticing and were warning everybody about the possible threat of occupational displacement due to the geris in the lake. But now the threat is become a reality. And many people, and we will go back to that, have become daily laborers. They try to fish, but they also have to become daily laborer and try, in order to survive. In this situation, in this worsening condition of socioeconomic condition of the fishing people of the lake, part or in some cases, some households, and in some cases, a consistent number of households in a village could accept the proposal of the agents, the company agents, to actually implement illegal aquaculture. What does this proposal imply? What does it mean? This means that there is a meeting in the village, and some families will decide to accept, and some families will step back. But this proposal means that the agent will lend the money to set up the cultivation to the fishing people. The fishing people will have actually to sell all the shrimps to the agent to a price which is less than the market price, and they will also the price of the initial money that have been lent will be deducted from the payment of the harvest. But if there is a loss, and this is highly possible because maybe due to the weather condition, adverse weather condition, there may be important losses in the harvest. Actually, the costs of the harvest losses will be deducted from the value of future harvest, which means that the possible losses of aquaculture activity are actually offloaded on the fishing people. This is a worsening of the situation. And while some fishing people are accepting to do that because they are facing the threat of occupational displacement, normally it is not the household that are already so poor that they have to, many members of them have to become daily laborers that accept that, because these households are not in the position to face any additional risk in their life, economic risk. But other households who know that they are facing the threat of becoming also daily laborers and to be involved in an extremely exploitative labor market, which is the market of daily labor activities, maybe they see this as a possibility in order to try to avoid this, in order to try to diminish their indebtedness. And they are well aware, and they would tell you that aquaculture practices are dangerous and they should not be there. But they're also well aware that the law is not being implemented. On top of that, the most important factor is that they know very well that if they refuse the proposal of the agent and they decide, no, we will not practice aquaculture in this position, it is very likely that the agent will encroach violently their water. The water of the village. In fact, these proposals are done to villages in which part of the waters are maybe already encroached, and to villages that borders with another villages in which the waters are encroached. So they know very well that if they refuse, the water will be in any case encroached with violence. So there is a profound element of implicit coercion in this. and in the acceptance of the fishing people to actually implement these practices. The fishing people have never stopped to actually go to court to ask for the implementation of the law and to demonstrate, but it has been clear that these demands go unheard. Sometimes it is possible that the orders of the courts, of local courts, are implemented, and in part of the lake the geese are destroyed the day there is a big media show, and the day after the geese are already there. Sometimes it happens that the fishing people go to police station and they actually want to make clear that they have been threatened by gundas in their own villages, and nothing happens. And so the gundas are even more powerful. They know that they have power on the fishing people, because even if they go to police and complain, nothing happens there. So this is a situation in which this phenomenon happens. And of course, in some cases, this implies big losses for the fishing people. And in some cases, these losses are too much and they cannot bear these losses. This also explains partially why there is another practice which is on the rise, which is the practice of subleasing. I think the previous slide would be okay, not this one, but the previous one. The next one. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, it was okay. And why subleasing is happening? Subleasing is illegal. Subleasing means that the fishing people actually lease to a company, sublease to a company agent the water that they have leased from the public authorities in order to fish. Sometimes they have no choice because they have actually lost and they have gone so indebted, because they have lost harvests when they have accepted to practice aquaculture for the companies, that they have no choice but to accept to sublease their waters. Subleasing means that they cannot fish in their own waters, and normally the subleasing is paid a very a sum which is ridiculous to the fishing people. They cannot live with that. They would pay the rent to the state, and there nothing else would be left. Nearly nothing else would be left for them. Sometimes they sublease because of indebtedness. They sublease because of urgent material needs, such as they need to build new houses, they need to pay for health care. But of course, the threat of violence is always there. If they decide, if they're approached by a company agent or by a wholesaler asking to sublease their waters, and they say no, they know that the threat of violence is there. And so, and this is disrupting for the resistance movement. And this is a consequence of the fact that the state has denied for years the implementation of the law in Chilika Lake. And clearly, this denial was a way of asserting the class power of the dominant stratum, which were actually getting profit from shrimp cultivation in Chilika Lake. This was a tremendous consequence of the refusal to implement the law in Chilika Lake. And the whole scenario was a scenario where a minority of the fishing people have been able to slightly benefit from aquaculture practices, and in fact there is some social differentiation in the villages, but the majority of the fishing people did not benefit from this. Their socio-economic condition continued to worsen, and many of them had actually to become daily laborers in order to survive. May I know how much time I have left?
You have 7 minutes left, Matilde.
Oh,
7
that's
minutes.
enough. That's enough.
Okay.
That's enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
And I think that now we can turn to the condition of the Chilika fishing people who are actually forced to become daily laborers. Now, it is true that historically, the Chilika fishing people, especially the young men, I think we can go to the last slide, especially the young men, have been part of the rural population of the rural poor in Orissa that is historically involved in seasonal migration trajectories. So historically, the young male from Chilika used to seasonally migrate, maybe towards Gujarat and other parts of the state, and being employed in activities such as construction work and so on and so forth. But it is also true that in the last few years, there have been an increase of men and women who actually had to become daily laborers in order to survive, because the disruption in the social fabric of Orissa caused by the implementation of illegal aquaculture has fragmented the livelihood of the fishing people to the point that a considerable part of them had to become daily labor. And actually, just I think we can go to the last slide. Thank you for that. And actually, what actually happens is that the fishing people who cannot survive with fishing in any case would try to fish. And during my fieldwork, they were well aware, and they were not denying the hardships related to traditional fishing activities. But they were also conscious that a downsizing or a loss of such activity would have condemned them to higher levels of vulnerability and fragmentation of their lives. So they would try to fish, but they also, for part of the year, sometimes 100 days at least, they have to become laborers in fields, workers in construction, workers in local factories such as cashew nut factories. And I have tried to give a gendered reading of this phenomenon, and I have made many focus groups with women, some also with men, and many focus groups with women from Chilika who had become daily laborers. When you become a daily laborer and you are a fisherman and you become a daily laborer for a consistent part of the year, it is also, you have to consider that this activity implies some costs. For example, the transport costs. And sometimes it happens that women are hired for agricultural work in a nearby village and the contractor is sending transports to go to work. But there is no transport to go back. This is not arranged by the contractor. So this happens that these women have to walk or to pay their transports or to walk long distances. And in the life of women, this has meant to combine the reproductive activities and daily labor. And this has actually meant that in their normal day, they get up at 3, 4 a.m. and they do the houseworks and they go for daily labor and they are back. Maybe they have to walk back to the village and they are back by 11 p.m. What happens is that these women actually don't have time for proper rest, don't have time for social interaction with a member of the family, including the children. And they were not romanticizing their previous occupation. Selling fish to the nearby villages could have also exposed them to discriminatory practices by upper caste persons. Some of them told me, it happened to me that I was beaten because I touched something that I was not supposed to touch. But now their perception is that their life after becoming daily laborer has become even harder than before, due to the extremely tiring, uncertain, and fragmented and underpaid working conditions resulting from the interplay of their class and caste and gender identities. And they lamented the deterioration of their physical condition due to the hard condition of work. But most of all, the distress that they were expressing in focus groups and the deep anxiety and anguish was that, notwithstanding all the efforts that they were doing in order to try to work and to accept any available job in order to contribute to the economy of the household, actually they couldn't overcome, and the situation of indebtedness, they couldn't see any result and any improvements in their life, and in some cases their life was even worsening. I talked with one woman who told me that actually because of debt she has lost her house in the village because the moneylender locked her house, and she had to rent a smaller house in the village. And it was with deep, deep anxiety that they were saying, we are getting ill, we have no time for ourselves, we are sacrificing our health, but our situation is not improving, and sometimes it is worsening. And in some cases, these people go to the labor market in nearby cities, and I have interviewed women from Chilika that were actually in Bhubaneswar labor market. And that if they travel to the labor market in the city in order to look for a job, because they have no other opportunity to do so, of course they will be exposed to additional transport costs in a condition which is totally uncertain, because in Bhubaneswar labor market, you stand there, you may be approached by an employer or by a contractor, but you may also be not approached, and you may end up not having done any job, but you have spent money in order to take the train. In some cases, these women obtain maybe 2 days of work, maybe in construction, which is extremely tiring. They told me that they had to carry on their shoulders heavy bags or building materials while climbing on the stairs of the construction. And if you get job for 2 days, you will have to sleep somewhere, but they cannot afford to sleep in anywhere. And so in some cases, they end up sleeping at the station. And in some cases, they had no choice but bringing with them a small child. And of course, this situation of precariousness was a source of anxiety for a future that they saw extremely problematic. But when I asked them, why are you forced to do daily labor? Were you doing this 10 years back? No. Why are you doing it now? What is the main reason why you are doing this and you have to do this? They said immediately, the problem is illegal shrimp cultivation in the lake. And some of them had been a part of the movement against illegal aquaculture practices, and they still think that the demands of the movement are important, but they also are aware of the fact that there is a relentless denial, a continuous denial of law enforcement in the lake by the state authorities, and that the situation is unlikely to change. And on the one hand, this is detrimental to the movement because this is discouraging, but also this weakens the movement because these people are overwhelmed by exhausting rhythms, exploitative labor conditions, new difficulties, and actually new struggle on the new places where they work. Women working in cashew nut factories told me that they actually were paid 5 rupees. Yeah?
You have to complete, yeah.
I will complete. 5 rupees per kg, and they obtain 10 rupees per kg for peeling cashew nuts with the naked hands in boiling water. Sometimes so they could get a slight improvement in their working condition, but mostly not because of actually the tremendous lack of employment in the state, which brings then so many people to accept any available job. So I think that indeed we can understand why the movement was weakened. This does not mean that demands of the movement are not important. They are tremendously important. The demand for democratizing the social and economic life of the fishing people through revitalizing the fishing cooperatives and through a collective dimension of fishing is extremely important, but it is not enough at the moment. And I think that this actually tells us and makes us reflect about the importance to create and to unite the struggle of different subaltern social strata in Orissa, informal daily labor, fishing people, landless people, displaced people. And I think that I deeply think that maybe to encourage such alliances is the only way in order to promote, if you believe that this is important and urgent, a development project where modernity and social justice can be conjoined. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Grazie, Matilde. Grazie, excellent presentation. In fact, this morning or this afternoon only, this morning or this afternoon only, I received an email from legendary Dr. Amit Bhaduri. I had sent him an invitation for Matilda's talk, and he just wrote a one-line email to, he said, Bani, bear it in mind when you talk of auctioning of natural resources in Chilika and Orissa in your conference today, with perhaps ABC company, I'm not giving the name of the company, and other similars around. And I had told him that Dr. Bhaduri, Matilde is a very pro-people person and also very frank, and she is against what I call livelihood privatization. But in fact, Matilde surprised me today. She was more frank than even I expected. You better be careful for your Indian visa, Matilde. That was a fantastic presentation. Now,
keep in mind to be careful.
I always say that in any conference, the presenter knows everything, the discussant and the commentators know something, and the moderator knows nothing. So since I'm the moderator, of course I know nothing. So I will, I'll be inviting Dr. Naik to present. But before that, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Virendra Naik. And Amarendra, if you can bring in that PowerPoint slide where Dr. Naik's introduction is there. So it's an honor to introduce Dr. Virendra Naik. Yeah, at present, he's a columnist. In fact, he retired as a professor of mathematics from Utkal University, Bani Bihar. But I think that is an incorrect introduction of him, I many times think, because I consider him as the best political economy analyst in the state, without a doubt. And many international scholars, not just Matilde, people from US and all that, they would always corroborate that claim, because his advantage is, because he's a mathematician, he brings his logical mathematical mind into analysis, and so his analysis becomes high class. His greatest contribution to Orissa, I believe, is the Odisha one-day conference he used to organize on every Utkal Divas. Utkal Divas is 1st April for almost a decade, probably 10 years or more, and it was under the aegis of Vikalpa Sandhani Mancha, that means Alternative Seeking Forum, and that used to be followed up by the proceedings, and the proceedings was called Odisha Odia Samiksha. And this he was bringing out with my former colleague, Professor Devi Prasad Das, who's now off academics for a while, and led Pradyumna Vadabhai, who was the editor of Pragatibadi, former MP. They were the co-editors of Dr. Naik. And that publication was such high class that if one of the most important persons in EPW once said, Bani, I'm really impressed that this Oriya vernacular periodical has such high class content in some analysis and all that. I consider Dr. Virendra Naik as my guru, both me and my wife, and I have learned a lot from him, including about political economy. In fact, one of the important things that I will tell all researchers, we people who work in political economy think that, we know a lot and economists don't know all that lot. Today's seminar is very unique. All the people associated with, except the Orissa Economics Association President Secretary, all the people are non-economic substance. Matilde is a sociologist, Dr. Virendra Naik is a mathematician, Shrikanta has a commerce background, and even myself, economics is my history, now I teach finance. So it's fantastic that we are showing that non-economists can also talk finance. So again, honor, Dr. Naik, if you please discuss Matilde's paper and throw any light, it will be fascinating to listen to you. Over to Dr. Naik.
Thank you, Professor Mishra, for your extremely flattering words. I am really embarrassed. But that you have considered me deserving to discuss on the presentation by Dr. Matilde Aduchi, who is a scholar of repute, relentlessly pursuing the study on marginalization of the communities living on the natural resources. Relentless is a word I think very often Martel uses in her research work. Therefore, I said that she is relentlessly pursuing this study. At the outset, let me make it clear that though I once evinced in learning about the people's movement in post-independent Odisha, and in that context, the problem relating to the life and livelihood of the struggling people, I am no more keeping myself abreast of the situation about whom I was once learning. So I am afraid if I can do justice to the responsibility I have been assigned. I know Matilde since 2004 when she came to Odisha for her field work in Chilika. She has been a frequent visitor to Odisha for her field studies on exploitation of natural resources in Odisha, about which our usual adage is, Odisha is rich in mineral resources yet poor. Matilde's studies, as far as I have understood, answer why Odisha is yet poor. Now coming back to the presentation by Matilde, while listening to it, I was reminded of the question that an illiterate elderly fisherwoman from Chilika was asking to the literate audience where I was part of. It was on 1st April 1998. Professor Misra has already given you some information about Vikalpa Sandhani Mancha. It was in fact that forum that we were discussing on people's movement in post-independent Odisha and the role of women. The lady who was asking the question was Sushila Behera. She is no more, who had braved against police barricade leading a group of women and participated in the demolition of the Tata constructed embankment. What she said, I quote her, "What ultimately happened? We could drive away Tata, but the lake had gone to the control of non-fishermen. We have become beggars on the street. Nothing changed in our life. We still remain destitute. Why this is so? Would you, gentlemen, explain it to me?" She was asking us. And if I remember, probably we did not at that particular moment give an explanation. But should I say today that the answer is in Matilde's presentation, where she has already been given a graphic description of the situation in Chilika Lake and how the socio-economic condition is progressively worsening. In fact, I was going through a paper by her, The Relentless De facto Privatization Process of Chilika Lake, India. And in fact, this relentless de facto privatization of Chilika water was probably echoing that elderly woman's wailing that lake had gone to the control of non-fishermen. Now, how the control came to the non-fishermen? Let me tell you, I will give my opinion, which will be a mixed up of what Matilde said and what I have learned, somewhat anecdotal it could be. It is an irony that some city-based activists who were against the entry of Tata into Chilika water and were part of the movement against Tata's project were in favor of enterprising youths in prawn business to be allowed in Chilika. Biranchi Behera of Chilika Matsyajeevi Mahasangha, I would like to remember them here, recalls a seminar in Bhubaneswar where some prominent participants expressed such views. The view was, as I told you, enterprising youths in prawn business to be allowed in Chilika. What they exactly said is this. Biranchi recalls, such views shocked Chilika Matsyajeevi Mahasangha because those who claimed leadership of agitation against shrimp farming were now suggesting not Tata but small Tatas should be allowed shrimp farming in Chilika. We realized that our agitation is only against Tata project, not against shrimp farming or not for saving Chilika. Our demand was that Tata should go, but with it all encroachments must be demolished. So when we speak about the weakening of the people's movement, I'm afraid that seed was probably there when people were protesting against Tata, because the divergent views, the city west activists and those who are fishermen activists, there was a divergent in their views, but they were together and fighting the Tatas. In fact, this is what Biranchi Behera had written in the proceedings of a seminar held almost 25 years ago under the auspices of Vikalpa Sandhani Mancha, a forum for alternative seekers. In 1996, he had said it and it was recorded. It must be known that the movement Chilika Bachao Andolan had many groups participating besides Chilika Matsyajeevi Mahasangha, a body of fishermen of Chilika. The trajectory of this movement needs to be studied to understand who in this umbrella organization were promoting the entry of non-fishermen for prawn business. It is interesting to note that after the exit of Tata, it was Chilika Matsyajeevi Mahasangha alone which was leading the movement against illegal aquaculture and any proposed policies that might squeeze the traditional fishermen right on Chilika water. In fact, massive rallies were witnessed in Bhubaneswar besides activities in Chilika. They were during 90s, late 90s and during 90s and also early years of the current century. I think before 2004, when Martil came to Orissa and began working. It's very massive, really massive. So it is not that there were not small non-fishermen players operating in the waters of Chilika and harvesting shrimp, but with the entry of Tata, it attracted attention. I remember in a meeting of Ganatantrik Adhikar Suraksha Sangathan, GAS at Balaswar in 92-93, I had questioned the Chilika Bachao Andolan. Is it fully a movement of traditional fishermen of Chilika, or it is a movement sponsored by small prawn farmers, arms, or traders against Tata? I was snubbed. I was literally snubbed by the president of GAS in that meeting who was residing there. But Biranchi's information proved my suspicion, and the gentleman who had snubbed me later acknowledged my suspicion as real. In the meantime, in 1996, shrimp farming was declared illegal. Already Matilda mentioned about it in 1993, Orissa High Court, and then in 1996, the Supreme Court. But time to time, media has been reporting the demolition of illegal prawn gheris, which suggests that the illegality goes on being committed. And Martil's study shows this illegal aquaculture is rising in the sense that more and more area of Chilika water coming into the fold of illegal aquaculture. This only shows that resistance to such illegality is becoming weaker and weaker. Why? Why it is becoming weaker and weaker? The illegality could be prevented by law enforcing authorities. The illegality could be resisted by the fishermen community living around Chilika. But if the illegal aquaculture is pursued by local fish shrimp exporters, backed by those who are top-level bureaucrats and politicians, and exercise their control over abundant natural resources of the state through their control of the state apparatus, then how can one expect law enforcing authorities to prevent the illegality? Martil calls such bureaucrats and politicians as neo-rentier class. She has not mentioned in her lecture, but I found that she has defined, she actually characterized them as neo-rentier class. I may tell you, this class was known to them who were fighting against the control of non-fishermen over Chilika water. They called this class Bhatia, rhyming with Khotia, a traditional fisherman caste living on the eastern part of Chilika. Kunja Upadhyay, who has observed the Chilika movement quite closely, characterizes this Bhatia group as comprising high-ranking administrative officers, the relatives of ministers, and MLAs, shrimp traders who live in Bhubaneswar and Puri. So Martil's neo-rentier class active in Chilika is nothing but Kunja Upadhyay's Bhatia class in Chilika. Martell's new rentier class has certainly broader connotation as they are active in every place where the illegal exploitation of natural resources are continuing, be it is in mining or in forest. In the context of Chilika, this class ensures for itself an informal share in the profits derived by the exporters from illegal aquaculture practices in exchange for its endorsement of these practices. This class, therefore, not only causes the law enforcing authorities to turn a blind eye towards illegal aquaculture, it also causes the law enforcing authorities to look other way when the resisting fishermen are mauled by the violence unleashed on them. Thus, fishermen face what Martell refers to denial of law universalism. From Martell's presentation, it appears that this neo-rentier class is the real villain. As long as this class remains, the entire scenario in respect of Chilika would be the perpetuation of illegal aquaculture as a manifestation, what Martell calls privatization, de facto, relentless de facto privatization of a privatization process. The owner of Chilika is the government of Odisha, but who ultimately controls the water is the neo-rentier class, and that too without halt as growth of illegal aquaculture soars. So the fate of common fishermen, women is not going to change, because they are not only more and more losing their access to the source of livelihood from Chilika, they are also more and more facing the denial of law. The access being restricted. The search for other occupation for livelihood is on rise. Such occupational fragmentation certainly reduces the urge to unite and resist the illegal aquaculture. Some may even resort to illegal aquaculture to work for those who are into illegal aquaculture, thus reducing the strength to resist. Some means those who belong to the fishermen community. In this context, I would have liked Martell to include in her presentation the views of the youth of Chilika as to how they view Chilika waters as their source of livelihood. Martell began her field study in 2004, and again a decade after she undertook the second field study, the 8-year-old in 2004 must have attained voter's age of 18. Their views on Chilika would have given some idea about the future of Chilika Lake and the inhabitants around it. Martell is certainly worried about weakening of protest against illegal aquaculture. To be honest, even in mid-90s, many activists and scholars had seen the protest weakening as it was in post-Tata period. Tata had just exited, and the group in the movement who were supporting local groups in shrimp trading had withdrawn. It had been a bewildering moment for local fishermen under Chilika Matsyaji Mahasangha. But they gathered their bearing and raised the movement, and as I had said earlier, became quite strong. But what I am saying, it relates to what happened almost 2 decades ago. But as Martell's presentation suggests, on the basis of field study, in 2015, she is convinced that at the moment, Chilika fishing population cannot successfully protest alone. She proposes there should be an alliance of classes of labor as a whole, alliances with other subaltern groups in the state, and should form a common struggle horizon. Such suggestion reminds me the saying, workers of the world unite. You know who had raised this slogan, Marx and Engels, in the Communist Manifesto 172 years ago. Hope such alliances are fostered, and the misery of common man, be he is a fisherman or a miner or a migrant labor, should come to an end. I may mention in this context about the formation of a forum in 1994 named as Vikalpa Samdhani Mancha, a forum for alternative seekers, where an effort was made to bring together the activists of the resistance movements in Odisha. In 1996, the activists of Balyapad movement, Gandhamardan movement, and Chilika movement were brought onto one platform where they articulated their struggle. The ostensible purpose was to force an alliance. Though no formal alliance was forced, yet in later years, in every resistance movement in Orissa, those activists participated and expressed their solidarity with local people. But Martell's suggestion calls for much broader alliance, may be more effective. Lastly, I must thank Matilde for her presentation and for providing me an insight into the human activities in and around Chilika. She is a social scientist, an expert in the field, and I am a dilated. I have mixed up my decades back experience and learning, anecdotal with Matilde's scholarly observation. I do not know to what extent I have done justice to the role I have been assigned to by the organizers of this webinar, Odisha Economic Association, its president, my friend Dr. Bhavesh Chen, secretary Dr. Amarendra Das, and its past president and moderator Professor Banikant Mishra. If I have not come up to their expectation, I may be excused, but I must thank all those who have joined this webinar and bore my babblings. Thanks again to Matilde for interest in Odisha, its economy and its people. Thank you. I suppose I have finished my talk.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. You can never disappoint. People say that it's difficult to leave Dr. Nai because when he keeps on talking, it's such fascinating to listen to him. But there's always time limited. Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to do but unshackle your chains. So Matilde can say, Chilika people unite. You have nothing to do but just free Chilika from those who do not belong there, but peacefully, without violence. That's always something we have to keep reminding people. So thank you very much, sir. Fascinating, of course, as always. And we will be now inviting Shrikanta Mohanty. Amarendra, can you please bring in the third page of my slide? Third page of my slide. So it's a pleasure to introduce Shrikanta Mohanty. As you see that we are taking people, one is a sociologist who talked about political economy in Chilika Lake. Second is a mathematician who's a truly political economy analyst who has been involved also in the field. And third is Shrikanta, who is an activist. He is right there in this movement. So it's a pleasure to introduce Shrikanta Mohanty, and I'm really thankful that he agreed. He's an activist. He's a state leader of All India Khet Mazdoor Kishan Sabha, a national organization working for the small and the marginal farmers, as well as agrarian laborers. He has been closely involved in people's movements relating to their rights over natural resources, including the Chilika Bacha Andolan, Save Chilika movement. And as you can see today, we had a sociologist presenting the paper, a mathematician discussing it, and a commerce master's, Shrikanta's commerce background, who will be commenting on it. So it's a good thing. I'm very happy about it, Shrikanta. And please, have your say in 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you. Is Shrikanta there?
He has to unmute and speak. He has to unmute.
Yes. Shrikanta, please unmute.
Thank you, Vanikanta sir. Thank you, Virendra sir, giving me the opportunity to talk here. And thank you to the Economic Association, Orissa Economic Association, for a very lively talk on displacement movement and the natural economy. I begin with that the commodification of nature leading to the growing of natural degradation on the one hand, and the separation between nature and human. That is happening in Odisha now. All natural resources are commodified today. In this process, in this neoliberal economic process, real producers are alienated from the nature. So they are deprived not only from their home, but from their livelihood. There is one common refrain across all the anti-displacement movement, that where shall we go leaving our land and livelihood? Today we will face everywhere. Can the state provide a better alternative than the present? What we experienced in the last 7 decades, those who lost their land, their livelihood for the project, however, they had their negative experience in these 7 decades. They lost their livelihood, they lost their land, they lost the forest, everything. In the primitive accumulation process, everything they lost. Be it in Hirakud, in Machkund, in Hindustan Aeronautic Limited, or in Narco project. Everywhere, the tribal people, the fishermen people lose their livelihood. So, in this, from this experience, today they are fighting everywhere, be it in Neomagiri, be it in Chilika or in Kujong area. People are fighting against this accumulative process, the neoliberal economic process, because they don't see any better life in this process. Even the project like HAL and NALCO, which are the government project, the local tribal people were not rehabilitated properly till today. Even today, they are fighting for their rights. So, from the experience of the past, the people reject the modern day development because they are too worried to the fact that they will be disposed of the precious little they today they have. Oh, getting severed from the all roots that they have in the past and being those do not want to come to an uncertainty. So people resist. Everywhere they are resist. Anywhere, I think anywhere in the world, mining does not bring happiness to the local people. Rather, mining stops their smiling. Today, Tata brings an advertisement, mining brings smiling. But we'll rather think that mining stops their smiling. Across the world, mining industry has been hard selling dreams of development, employment and growth. But everywhere people are in a loss. One example from Ghana we can give, this data is from the Third World Network Africa, from Africa-based, Accra-based organization, and also from the Central Bank of Ghana. The gold mining exported. Ghana is a gold mining country, and they have exported more gold. And in this process, the mining companies acquired $5.2 billion, but the government receives only $68.6 million. That is only 1.7. That is only 1.77%. So anywhere in the world, mining is a cause for the people, so that people are opposing mining. In Odisha also, Odisha is probably one of the best example in the world how mining resources are not benefited the local people. That destroy the fragile economy also. Odisha tops in mineral output value 34% of the nation. Mining and quarrying sector combined in Odisha gives more about 10% of the value addition. But people of Kendujhar are so poor that 62% of the population are poor people. Likewise, bauxite is the second highest benefit giving revenue in Odisha. But people of Koraputu, 79% of the population are below poverty line. Likewise, Sukinda, the highest deposit of chromite in this valley, but the people of Sukinda suffers today like malnutrition, hunger death, death due to inhaling dust. So everywhere mining does not bring happiness. Rather, mining brings the destruction of the natural economy, and the destruction of the natural economy displaces the tribal people, the fishermen, the landless people. So, in this primitive accumulation process, Odisha has the highest number of people, tribal people, are displaced. So, people opposed all these projects, be it in Chilika or it in Neomagiri or it in Kujango. So, in these movements, the landless people take the leading role to fight against the mighty state machinery. Entry of mafias in Chilika way back in 80s, 85. After the 85, the prawn mafias enter in the Chilika lake because there is a prawn dollar. Like petrodollar, there is a prawn dollar. So to milking the prawn dollar, the mafias enter the Chilika area, and from that time, classes between mafias, non-fisherman and fisherman started. Before that, fishing taken to be a untouchable work. So upper caste Odia people, the fisher folk told them Odia people, the upper caste people did not enter into the fishing activities. When exporting of prawn culture happened in Chilika, the upper caste people also enter into this business. But we think that entry of a capital dismantled the caste system. But upper caste people engaged in a so-called lower caste job practices untouchability till today. They enter into the business, but they practices untouchability till today. And a caste-hatred practice brings the touchable people and forming them an united action. But due to some problem, the so-called untouchable people, the fishermen people, did not come to one group. Today, what happened today? The Kandara have one organization. The Bahania have one organization. Different type of caste people have different organization in this Chilika lake. So their unity dismantle. So their unity weakens. So they cannot fight against these mighty mafias and mighty state. So state is mingled with the mafias, the neo-rentier class that sir told today, the neo-rentier class. So people should come together, fight for the right on the water body. The water body, they have the nature have created the water body. People who depend on this water body are today deprived. So all people, those who want to want for their right, should come together and fight. Come together and should unite under one banner and fight for the right over the Chilika water body. So the movement is not come to an end. The movement will be again coming up, because there is no other economic source of these people. These fishermen people have been deprived of every.
Babu. Thank you, Shrikanta Babu. I think we have temporarily lost Shrikanta. But I think he has ended. So I will now invite Matilde to answer two questions. First one is by Suravi Naik. She said, would you like to reflect a bit on the class relations that existed before the start of illegal aquaculture? Does such historical context of class dynamic help us understand the contemporary marginalization of the fishing community, the classes of labor? So after you answer that, I will take up a second question from Deepak Mishra. So Matilde, Amarendra, would you please unmute her if she's not unmuted yet? Yeah, Matilde, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you, Surabhi Nayak, for this very important question. And what emerged from my findings, it was that before shrimp aquaculture was actually implemented, the traditional fishing people in Chilika were a very poor community. Today, still they are. Due to aquaculture practices, you can see some social differentiation emerging. Before, I think that, and there are important studies on that made by Orissan scholars, this community was much less socially differentiated and poor. As for their class belonging, I have, this is a very interesting question for me, because in the past I wondered whether you can think of them as you could, as Jairus Banaji's work may in some cases suggest, as disguised wage labor, in the sense that they had a relationship with the traders and with the wholesalers that actually forced them to fish for the trader and for the wholesalers because they were indebted with them. So this is a fascinating question, and it would deserve much more thinking. I think this community was poor and less differentiated than today. You could consider it a sort of belonging to the universe of labor. And maybe the fact that they were so poor also was important in trying to understand why it was so difficult for them to oppose the powerful interests that were implementing aquaculture practices. I don't know whether I have answered in a way which is satisfactory.
No, Matilda, you have, in fact, because as you correctly said, it will probably require a longitudinal study. Without that, you cannot compare context pre and post. So, this is a fascinating question, but these are difficult questions to answer unless you follow it up over a long period of time. And, maybe Dr. Naik will join, will answer that later on after you answer Deepak Mishra's question. And Deepak's question is, given the significance of explicit and implicit coercion in the process of privatization, should these processes be understood as a part of ongoing private accumulation or as a part of normal functioning of expanded reproduction under capitalism, or something entirely different? So please answer that question.
This is an extremely important question, and in fact, the debate of primitive accumulation is an important one today. When I say the privatization of Chilika Lake water is relentless, we can also understand this as a process of primitive accumulation which is relentless. So actually, when Karl Marx was reflecting on primitive accumulation, he had in mind the development of capitalism in Europe. Can we, 2000 years after this reflection, think that probably the process of primitive accumulation does not end up with the beginning of capitalism, but in other parts of the world it is actually continuing, and so maybe it is also part of the expanding of reproduction under capitalism? I mean, this is an important question, and that Professor Deepak Mishra has raised, and I think that probably we should look at this issue that way. It is possible that the processes of primitive accumulation are part of the functioning of capitalism, of its continuous expansion.
Yeah.
But of course, it deserves much more thinking, because it's an extremely important question.
But what Deepak Mr. Mishra may be asking also, it could be primitive accumulation, but under a non-capitalist system. He's saying, is it possible that there is a different system which also has primitive accumulation, but that, as you correctly says, it requires a far deeper analysis and thinking and all that. So now I will get back to Shrikanta, who has, of course, ended and all that. Both Shrikanta and Dr. Virendra Naik, there's one important question has been asked about this class, which Surabhi had asked, a very important question. In 1 minute each, Dr. Virendra Naik and then Shrikanta sir. Virendra sir, let me ask that what is the role of this class thing, which Surabhi asked, that before the start of the shrimp culture and all that, and after the shrimp culture, was there difference in the class structure, the class relation? Did the Chilika Bachao Andolan, is a Save Chilika movement, itself change the class relation? Dr. Naik, first, if they could answer in 1 minute, then Shrikanta Babu can answer in 1 minute, just in 1 minute, briefly, or 1 minute and a half. Is Virendra sir there? Sir? Okay, Shrikanta, why don't you answer?
Is Virendra sir?
No. Actually,
Sir, okay, sir, can you just answer in a minute and a half? Is the class relation in Chilika, has it, well, it has probably influenced the Chilika Bachao Andolan, but what Surabhi is asking, has it itself gone through a change? Because sometimes this class relation, while trying to influence the movement, may get influenced by the movement. And that's a very difficult question to answer because cause and effect. So if you can very briefly, you can answer that. Do you feel that class relation itself has changed due to the movement? And then from you in a minute and a half and from Shrikant in a minute and a half, I'd like to hear.
Actually, I fail to understand what she means from class relation. What because you see the those actually who were thinking about the population who were living around Chilika Lake, and that population was largely fishing population, but they were actually involved in three kinds of activities. One is fishing, another is salt making, and third is your agriculture, cultivation. But later, in fact, this actually fisherman community, it has actually started its activities of fishing, concentrated on fishing since 1830. Since 1830, they have concentrated and they were getting fishery, that is called fishery potta. They were getting from the zamindars, but later when Odisha government took over in 1956, when there was abolition of Zamindari Act, then the Odisha government began giving them the fishery potta. And you know the fishery potta, how it was given? It was given to the central, there was a central cooperative society. They give it to the central cooperative society, takes the lease, and then it distributes among the primary village societies, primary cooperative societies, which are across the villages. So that is what. So the class relation means the upper caste, lower caste, and fishing caste. So that kind of relation, certainly, as Shrikant has said very rightly, that the attraction of petrodollar, prawn dollar, that actually drew the upper caste people into this business. Because because as I told you, the Bhatia group, the group which comprises the bureaucrats, the influential politicians, the shrimp mafia, they formed that group. So they were all upper caste people. So that upper caste people, their entry actually has completely emaciated the fortune of the lower class people, the fishing class people. Okay. So that the relationship has changed, but then the struggle has started. The upper class people also came to know that these people are becoming more and more vocal and more and more powerful. So they tried to, because the Sorana, there was a firing, you may remember, on May 29th, 1999, there was a firing in Sorana. And that was sponsored by mafia, shrimp mafia. They entered into fishermen's village and killed some people there. You remember those days in May 29. So certainly there was some tension has grown, class relation has become, there was absolutely the homogeneity that was there amongst the fishing community. It was completely disturbed by the entry of those non-fishermen. So class relation has been strained, certainly it is strained. And another thing is that when we say that some of those people who were in the villages, fishermen villages, as Matil has very rightly pointed out, they have subleased. This cooperatives, they have subleased to those upper class people. And if they don't sublease, they are afraid that it will be violently taken over. So you see, and the law is totally denied to those people who are getting mauled by the violence. So there is a big conspiracy, and that conspiracy suggests who are the conspirators and who are the victims. So this is what happened to the relationship.
Thank you, sir. In fact, your point, before Shrikanta answers, it's a very interesting point you make, because what class relation. And I was just thinking when you were answering, I realized class has to be defined very broadly. For instance, suppose my relations, the Brahmins, are showing dadagiri in one locality, and they are showing dadagiri and Kshatriyas. So Kshatriyas are supposed to be warriors, and Brahmins are supposed to be reading Vedas and all that. So there, what is class? But there the Brahmins will be the Kshatriyas, and the Kshatriyas will be the Brahmins. So class relation, the class, as Dr. Nag very nicely came to my mind, has to be actually defined in a very right way. So basically, instead of class relation, we call it interest relation. Okay, suppose myself and Amarendra have the same interest in a particular locality, we'll belong to the same class independent of our religion and, yeah. So again, Amarendra, can you take 4-5 minutes extra? Is it okay? I will.
No problem.
Shrikanta, please answer about this. Sir has given some fascinating insight. Is there anything you'd like to add, that the role of class relation in how it entered the movement, how it influenced the movement, and how it exited? So class relationship before, during, and after the Chilika movement, and very briefly,
Yes.
Sir has mentioned,
Before, it is the communal right of the fisherman community on the water body. But after the entry of prawn culture in this area, slowly the upper caste people and the outside people taken over the Chilika into their clutches. Before it, all fishermen have a homogeneity, one homogeneity community. But after the entry of prawn dollar, there is a thorough class difference in these areas. The upper caste people who are who had muscle power and also who have the money power have captured all the sources. The sources are the legally right of the fishermen people. And these sources, sources have been taken away by the upper caste people and the mafias from outside. So there is a class difference among the people. Those who are engaged in prawn culture are higher in the strata, and those who are deprived the water right on the Chilika are lower in the strata. So there is a class difference in this area also. Moneyed people from outside also have milked money from that area. Also, they have one class. So the rentier class, that is the rentier class from outside people. Outside people are the rentier class. The people in this area are two types of classes: the upper caste people, those who are engaged in prawn culture, in one class, and the deprived section, the fishermen people, are in another class. Though they are hand to mouth.
This was not there. This was not there before the movement, right?
Before it, this was not there. The non-fishermen people cultivated the land and they are engaged in cultivation, and the fishermen people engaged in fishing. So there is a not very good economy, but their economy actually not difference. So much difference. But after the entry of the prawn dollar, there is a huge difference in the class in this area.
Thank you, Shrikanta. It's wonderful to see Professor Sushil Khanna, who has always been very outspoken. Josh joined. Sushil, would you like to, or Sushil Da, would you like to ask any question, give any comments? I don't think Matilde has met you yet. Matilde, Professor Sushil Khanna, former professor of IIM Calcutta, very outspoken person, strong believer in secularism, has been a member of the Association of India's Friendship with Pakistan, and risked himself, and and wonderful. And he also works with people from Orissa. Asha Hans, I don't know whether you met that, Dr. Asha Hans, political science professor and former professor of political science with University. Amarendra would know her. So Sushil Da works closely with Asha Hans. So Sushil Saab, is there anything you would like to comment or ask Matilde? We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself. Sushil, you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Now we can hear you. Go ahead. No, we can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself. Amarendra, can you unmute Sushil?
No, he's already unmuted, I think.
Sushil, we can't hear you. We couldn't hear you at all.
Yes.
No.
Please unmute, yeah. We can't hear you. Is there a problem? We can't hear you. Sushil, there is some problem. We can't hear you. All right. But we'll get to hear. In fact, OEA should invite Sushil someday. You know, he has some excellent work on this. You know, he looks at this resource ownership and from a strategic perspective. So what we call privatization. In fact, once he had held a conference on this ownership of natural resources and all that, where my previous student Sagarika and I had presented a paper how natural resource privatization can be looked from a strategic perspective. The IIM Calcutta has a fascinating conference, how people bringing in from different. So from a management perspective, strategic perspective, you can look at it. Amar Naik, my colleague Amar Naik is here. Amar, would you like to pass a comment and give a question? I know we are running out of time. Amarendra would be waiting. But Amar, is there a question or a comment? And I see Radhakan Barik, you know, Radhakan Sethi is there, and Dr. Radhakan Barik was there. I think he might have left. Is Radhakan Barik Saab here? Radhakan Sethi? Would you like to ask any question? Amarendra, it's over. Back to you. You know, I shouldn't be taking any more time. I know it's already 5:49. So back to you. You'd like to close any time? Please feel free.
No, if there are any other comments or questions, we can take up. Otherwise, within 5 minutes, we shall conclude. By 6 o'clock, I think we should finish.
Okay, so it's 5:49. So we have 11 minutes. So is there any other question? Bhavesh sir, any question? Bhavesh sir, of course, will be looking only at statistics. He will say, Matilda, is the T statistics significant or not? Tell me. Right, sir? That's what matters. And if you don't have any T, he's not interested. He's interested in T statistics and having a cup of tea. Those are the only two T's that matter to him. Sir, I'm pulling your legs. Bhavesh sir happens to be my sister's student, so I take some liberty with him. And I take some liberty with him. So any other questions? Dr. Binayak Rath is here, very celebrated economist, former, as Chancellor. So Binayak sir, would you like to have a question? Would you pass any comments on this? You have been at ISER and NISER and all that, and Amarendra is there. So Binayak sir, we can't hear you. Binayak sir, you have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself. No, you're still muted. We can now we can probably hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear. Yes.
Okay. I think I must congratulate first the organizers, Dr. Sen, Amarendra, and the moderator, Dr. Banikant Misra, and also the presenter. Excellent presentation made by Dr. Matilde Adiu, and also by Birendra Naik. Birendra Naik made a nice presentation. Let me share my concerns. I have not done study for Chilika, but I have done a lot of study for NTPC. And I have also done a lot of study on rehabilitation resettlement issues. What's my observation? That whenever there is a land acquisition by any mining company or by any industry, the major negative impacts are on the women and children. The first casualty of land acquisition is women and children. What Matilda has said, that in Chilika, because of the new rentier class which is emerging, the first casualty will be the women community. No more employment opportunity available to them. And also the local people. And what she has said, my only concern is that there is a government of Odisha has created Chilika Development Authority. What role the Chilika Development Authority is playing in relieving the problem of the local people? They also have a responsibility to see that the equity and social justice is established in use of its natural resources. Its natural resources belong to the state. If Chilika Development Authority is the authority which a lot of money is pumped to Chilika Development Authority. I have a question. I think if she has not studied this actually, just have studied what role Chilika Development Authority can play in bringing the economy into back. Particularly, the women community's interest should be taken care of. The cooperative movement which are there, already Dr. Nayak has given a very good analysis that the cooperative analysis or cooperative movement has become weak as usual in the country. And this has become new capitalist concept. And because of this, now we find that the casualty will the fishermen community, the weaker section. And also Dr. Nayak has rightly said that who are the people taking over from them? The richer caste community, namely the Brahmins and the higher caste people, they have entered into fishing business. Not the Kyoto community is not involved. That the upper caste people are involved. They are the people who are to be regulated. They are the people to be controlled. And I think it needs a movement. In a movement like this, actually, all of us has to play the role of a change agent. I think I'm all for it. I think whatever maybe from this actually, we can start a movement actually. Chilika, I think Amarendra belongs to that area. Amarendra, why don't you start that? Let us all united and let us go to Chilika and Banpur area. I had gone to Banpur, Chilika, in my capacity as vice chancellor of the university, not to study the fisherman community. So I have seen what is the situation.
But we have, sir, we have to keep telling that we are peaceful. Otherwise, they will arrest us even if we are peaceful.
No, they will not that. They will not arrest us. No, I don't think they will dare to arrest us actually. Don't say that they will arrest us.
Nowadays, they don't want professors to start any movement. Before we close, of course, I know we have only 6 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rath. That's a CDA Matilde. Chilika Development Authority's role, I think, is an important, very important point has commented. Silu Mudulif. Silu is here. Silu is from Konark. His father was a farmer. He's one of our most brilliant PhD students, an excellent economist from ISI Delhi. And Silu has, as we tell in Oriya, Onge Nivech, he has experienced himself being how it feels to be in a village and place. So Silu, can you throw some light on Chilika, or do you have any question for Matilde on Chilika if you're there? Otherwise, if I would have taught you the smart way of attending a conference, you just log in and then vanish for your tea or coffee. That's not happening. I will ask Amar to pass a comment, and then we'll close. You, then Amar Naik, Professor Amar Naik is also here. Then we'll close. Hello.
Hi, sir. Hi, sir. Hi. Good evening, sir. And good evening, everyone. Actually, my place is in Konark, and I don't have that much of experience to much know about this Chilika Lake. But however, I can throw some lights on this. Like the fishermen, those who live in this in the sea. I mean, those who fish in the sea areas, like in Chandrabhaga, all these areas. So. So actually, the thing is that actually I don't know much about this. So I think it will be very difficult for me to give in such a. So I'm just learning about it.
I specifically ask you, in your area, in Konark, has privatization ever been a threat? Have you ever had to stand up against potential privatization? Very specifically, have you ever had that occasion to worry?
Yes, sir.
So was the community united together? Did you succeed in stopping privatization? Was the community together? Was the consensus?
Yes, sir. Actually, in the private, whenever something goes by the privatization, then like people in our area, they unite. So then I can see the only one thing that concerns is that those whose livelihood depend upon them, so they only go for this movement, or they start opposing, and those who don't have any link to them and they have different type of professions, so don't care. So I think this movement thing about whether to join the movement or not, it depends upon their profession. So it's just an incentive compatibility. So whether you want to go to that or not, it depends upon your profession.
That's an important comment, because it seems that they miss that there is long term, they might also suffer. But we are running out of time. Professor Amar Naik is here, my colleague. Is wonderful to have here. Very pro-people person, does wonderful things. Matilde, in case you met Amar when you made the presentation. Amar, any comments? We have only 3 minutes. We have to wrap it up in 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Vani. In fact, I was with my doctoral scholar, so I missed the most part of the presentation. But I did hear your comments towards the end and the last part of the conversation that I have been hearing. I think there are two issues. I'm sure you have already discussed. It is the issue of, it's a technical issue of understanding diversity for ecosystem to survive, and the issue of ownership that human beings are playing with. Privatization versus common ownership. The early study, I was involved a little bit in the Chilika Development Authority work, and the early studies, we have also tried to use actually community ownership to actually bring back the balance within the system. TDA has done that, and under Dr. Tripathi, they have actually tried that maybe around 5-6 years ago. And if we do not appreciate, if the administrators do not appreciate the significance of diversity that exists within a square feet, and this diversity cannot be managed through a centralized private ownership. If this is not understood, then the biosystem will break down. Human beings is only one part, but it's a beautiful biosystem that we know. And this biosystem we are going to lose. And I think there is more reason why the administrators and people and scholars should work to preserve this, rather than just thinking about some people are benefiting and some people, yes, human beings are the first species that you take care, but there are thousands and millions of species. I think that's what we should be thinking of. It's balancing our nature there. And if you don't take care, we'll lose this hotspot, the bio hotspot of the world.
And it's over to Amarendra to conclude. We took 30 minutes more than we had planned. Sorry about that. Amarendra, it's over to you. So it's been honored to do this. Thank you.
Okay, I think we had a very wonderful session. And let me first, okay, of course, I should have told you all in the beginning, but at the end, I should at least tell you. During my PhD, of course, I had read some of the works of Dr. Matilde Adusi, but then I had never interacted with her in any manner. Okay? But then I got an email from her, okay, asking for some papers, and then I also saw her. Of course, she forwarded her paper, and then I immediately asked, why don't you please speak on this issue to our scholars in the association? And we had actually interactions. For example, Professor Keshav Das actually, in fact, in the past had also asked me whether in the Orissa Economics Association we can have members who are not ODIs. Okay, and so there are such people actually around the world actually that they have worked a lot on Odisha issues, and probably there are few people actually who have worked so in depth at a theoretical level, I would say, and particularly working in this field, political economy framework. So that way, Matad's work actually has been really good, and I'm sure actually this would provide a framework actually to the young researchers who attended this conference to take up their issues and analyze how the natural resources can be managed and how the conflict arises. Of course, Professor Birendra Nayak actually has talked about all the movements that has happened in Odisha, particularly for preserving or conserving the natural resources or retaining the community ownership over the natural resources. And I think probably there is a need to document all these things properly and put it in the public domain where the researchers can read actually this easily. Why I'm saying this? But when I was a PhD student at Center for Development Studies, my teachers used to ask me, Amarendra, why no movements happen in Odisha? And whatever movements happen, all those movements are localized. So for example, the Naxal movement started in West Bengal. You can go to south, you'll find the template enter movement, the Sanskritization movement. So many movements at different other places, but no such movement has happened in Odisha. Okay, and but of course we have read that there are some movements that have happened. Professor Birendra Nayak actually mentioned all those things, and that is why I think that probably most scholars should work on this issue, that why the movements whatever has happened are all localized in nature, and we do not see a pan Odisha movement on some important issues. And what are the reasons behind it? probably that needs to be documented and studied carefully. So with that, I would say that no, we got enough food for thought today. And so I would like to thank Dr. Matite for agreeing kindly to speak to our members of the Orissa Economics Association. And let me tell you that in Orissa Economics Association, we have about 700 live members. And of course, some of them actually could join today, because nowadays there are so many webinars are happening at different places. But I think we got very quality audience actually. I think whoever are very serious, they were all attending. And I would like to thank Professor Banikan Mishra, actually, who is a good friend of Matit, and she had in fact written to me in her email that I address Professor Mishra as my brother. And so I thought probably this would be the best way to invite Professor Mishra to preside over this meeting, and that's why I asked him to give the introduction. I did not give the introduction of Dr. Matide because he would be the right person actually to give the introduction. And so the format actually was also designed by him, and I really appreciate. I think we had a very wonderful session for that. And Professor Birendra Naik, I have been associated with him since my MA days in Utkal University, and because of his ideas and his engagement with the All India Safe Education Committee, and we had actually some other webinars in the past also. So he's a person who thinks, more for the society, not simply remains confined in the mathematical equations. And, so I really appreciate. I still remember some of his writings actually, where he shows his concern and passion for the society. So I thank Birendra sir, and of course we'll always in touch for many other issues. And I also thank Srikant Bhai, who also agreed actually. And it is actually always good to listen to different people. It's not listening to only academicians give a very narrow perspective. And when you listen to the people who are deeply involved with the movements and who are working with the people, actually, you really get the real perspective. Okay? And so I thank Srikant Bhai for kindly agreeing to comment on the work of Dr. Matide. And I also thank our president, Professor Bhavesh Sen, who has been a guiding, he has been an inspiring source actually for me. And I am a student of him, and then now he's the president of Orissa Economics Association and I'm the secretary. So, it is always good to work with a person, who always, encourages the people actually to take out for different activities. And I also thank the participants, Professor Birendra Naik, and then Professor Vinayak Rath, actually, who commented on this, and also Dr. Amar Naik, and all the scholars who commented. I can see actually Dr. Deepak Mishra from JNU, and from so many other places. Surbi, my student now, who is working at CDS, and she's working on mining issues, actually, coal mining issues. So I thank everyone, okay? And I think with this I will conclude. That's all. Thank you again to all.
Thank you. Ciao, Matilde. Buono notte. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Amarendra. Very good.
Thank you, Amarendra. Wonderful.
I shall put this recording on the YouTube channel of Orissa Economics Association, and of course I will share the link with all of you who have participated, and particularly Matilde and Professor Banikan Mishra. I will share the link with all of you.
Thank you, Amarendra. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored.